I was confused at where to put it.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Roy.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late. Multitasking this morning. I made it. I didn't think I was going to make it, but I'm here.
Good morning.
Morning, Sharita.
Hey, good morning.
Uh, Melissa, are we at quorum?
We are, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, I will officially call our meeting to order at 10:35 a.m. Happy holidays to everybody. With that being said, the next item on our agenda is the approval of minutes, and I think we got those minutes on last week from Melissa. Thank you so much for getting those to us. And I will entertain any revisions or a motion to approve the minutes that we have.
Sharita, I'm sorry, this is Anthony. I think we need to, Melissa, correct me if I'm wrong. Do we need to approve last month's and this month's minutes?
That's correct. So we need to approve October and November today.
And October and November, what you sent us, right? I didn't even look at the dates. I just read everything you sent.
Yeah. So we
I
have,
know
I
one
sent-
the last one was November. I don't know. I think it was 2 sets of minutes there. Is that correct?
That's correct. So both of those minutes were in the last email as well as the policy for leaders approval.
Yep. So we need to approve minutes for October and November. If you haven't done so, can you quickly review those minutes? Give us any corrections that need to be made, or I will entertain a motion to approve the October and November minutes. I'm assuming people are reading. Is that what's happening right now?
I know we have a few who are listening in who wrote in chat that they have going to be limited with participation. So I don't know if that's some of what's happening.
I motion to approve.
I second. Sharita, if you're talking, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I have a motion by Danielle and a second by Ebony for our minutes for October and November. Is that correct, Danielle? Is that your motion?
Yes, I can't find my mute button, but yes, that's my motion.
Okay. All those in favor, please put yes in the chat box. If you're not in favor of that, you have the right to say no. And if you're listening in and you have reviewed the minutes, you can just give us your name and a verbal yes or no. So I can't tell whether I only see 1, 2, 3, 4 approvals. Is that enough, Melissa? Oh, there's Ebony.
I see enough, yes.
All right.
I think I'm seeing 6, unless I'm miscounting.
I wonder if Alicia, did you get a chance to review? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, never mind. Got 6. Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is our unsheltered numbers. Colin. I'm sorry.
Rita,
Yes,
we didn't do the November minutes.
the motion was for both minutes, October and November. I mean, yes, October and November. That was the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. The next item on our agenda is our unsheltered numbers. Colin.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Our unsheltered numbers are currently 51 families self-reporting, 69 singles unsheltered, which will drop down to 66 after 3 men go to shelter today. 26 families at risk of being homeless in the next 14 days, and 39 singles of being at risk in the next 14 days. Once again, these are all by self-report. I'll put it in the chat. The numbers creeped up a little bit from last week.
It has, and I also did get, I asked Nicole M this morning just to clarify how many were women and men for the singles. Just so we would, I want to say in some conversation we had, we were looking at that. Maybe it was the part of the meeting we're going to talk about later when we're looking at men's beds versus women's beds.
Yeah, Sharita, I sent that. It's
Yeah, I saw it. Thanks.
okay.
Colin, did you see it?
I did.
Okay.
I did. It was 39 men and 27
7 or something like that,
women, if I
women.
remember correctly.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is approval of our new COC grievance policy, and Anthony is presenting on that.
Well, good morning, everyone. Although a lot of time is allotted for this, and I want to give everybody enough time to really take it in, I'm gonna also spend a good amount of time giving some context to it, so that hopefully any questions will be answered. Let me just share my screen with everyone. Do you see the screen that says grievance policy updates?
Yes, we do, but we also see
Perfect.
your deck, so it's not just the whole presentation on the screen. And if
That's
you're fine with
okay.
it
I'm
being
gonna
that
go
way.
through it. I promise it's only 10 slides. I try not to do a long PowerPoint. It's got a lot of words. So anytime you guys want to stop me and ask a question, please feel free to do so. But like I said, I'm gonna spend some time on the context. So this is one of several policies that we are reviewing and revising accordingly this year for a January 1st start date. So the first, slide I wanted to say was, why are we changing this policy? And this is regarding the grievance policy that we have had in our COC since 2019. That policy was a first draft and had not been updated since. To give you some context, it was also the policy that set forth that all of the providers should establish their own within 60 days. That policy had a lot of broad reach and some general language that made it difficult to it was so open-ended that it made it difficult to know how best to deal with some issues. It was long, it was 5 pages and fairly complex. It also allowed grievances to be filed up to a year after the initial complaint, which we thought was way, way, way too long. The ombudsman panel got a bit complicated because of turnover and changes, and also demand on the time for folks. And then until recently, we had not been tracking the final outcome of grievances. So we knew that we needed to rework this policy and that it was going to be pretty substantial. So the next slide I put is the process that we went through to do it. We started with establishing sort of a reviewer panel. And on that panel are providers, some members of the lead work group, which also work for providers, and COC staff. We looked at policies across the United States, and these included, New York, Miami, St. Louis, Memphis, Detroit, Santa Clara County, California, and also our NCCEH balance of state policy locally. Every single policy is wildly different. And some are as short as 3/4 of a page, while others are 6 pages. So at our first review meeting, we began to discuss the existing policy, looking at some of the challenges that we had faced in it, and also answering some questions. And what we realized in that meeting is that after an hour and a half, we had only gotten through the introduction. So at that point, we took a step back and said, okay, let's have a framework discussion about the spirit of the policy and what we're all agreeing to. And because of that conversation, we ended up selecting the NCCEH balance of state policy as a template. So that became our base. And then we held a final review meeting on the new policy after it had been reworked internally for the Durham COC. So are there any questions so far on why we're changing it or the process that we used to get to the new policy? Okay, great. So a summary of the new policy, again, we modeled it after NCCEH. We adopted a code of conduct, which outlines the expectations of all COC members. The original policy kind of interchanged the words complaints and grievances. So in the new policy, we distinguish complaints as informal first steps and grievances as formal next steps. We also list the types of grievances, the reasons for them, and limitations to this new policy, which we'll talk about in the slides ahead. We're offering electronic or mail submissions, and also providing the timelines for resolutions. We're documenting the outcomes of grievances, and we have successfully reduced the document from 5 pages to just 3. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. We're going to start to talk about what the new policy looks like and feels like now. So this new policy begins with a code of conduct. It talks about how we value commitment and professionalism and gives you a series of 8 bullets that all members of the COC are expected to uphold. And you can see them here. That is to represent their clients and the COC and their agencies fairly, ethically, and respectfully, to understand the purpose of our COC and the role of ending homelessness in this county, to stay up to date on our strategies and contribute to planning efforts, to respect confidentiality and the sensitivity or private information about our clients and our COC. Let's see. To clarify their professional roles and obligations and exercise reasonable judgment, making sure that we avoid conflicts of interest or biases and that those things do not unjustly affect the people we serve. To work together as professionals to serve the best interests of our clients, to resolve conflicts proactively and responsibly, and to abide by the governing documents and other policies of the COC. So this is sort of our shared spirit of how we will conduct ourselves as members within the COC. Any questions so far? Okay, perfect. The new policy actually allows for 3 different types of grievances. So program participants may file a grievance using a provider's internal process. They also may appeal internally or file with the lead agency. Grievances typically will involve COC-funded programs and resolve within 30 days. If that is somehow unable to be resolved due to no fault of the parties involved, then we will grant a 30-day extension and continue to work for resolution. COC members, number 2, COC members may file a grievance against another member for violations of the code of conduct we just discussed, to activate lead agency involvement. When the lead agency has worked with the parties and cannot resolve within 30 days, then that case or that grievance will be forwarded by the lead agency to the HSAC chair or their designee to be resolved within 45 days. And finally, number 3, any complaints against the lead agency may be filed with the chair of the HSAC. The chair and 2 HSAC members will review and resolve within 45 days. So we wanted the language to be super clean. We wanted it to be easy for everyone to understand and also to have some easy expectations. So I said before that we would discuss the limitations of the new policy. Our old policy sort of allowed everybody to file a grievance about everything. And in this case, we wanted to just kind of tighten that up so that we entertained valid grievances, not just complaints where people were dissatisfied about certain things. So the HSAC will only become involved in unresolved grievances as they relate to the code of conduct, as I just outlined in the previous slide. And this policy does not apply to annual funding competitions or the coordinated entry system. Those 2 systems will have their own grievance and appeals process outlined in other policies. So Jeffrey, for example, is working on a coordinated entry policy right now, a revision of that policy. That policy will have its own grievance process, probably to be modeled very similarly to this, but with the distinction of being related to coordinated entry only. So we are already down to slide 9. Again, you can file electronically. And we recommend that everybody start with their internal process first. When people want to activate the lead agency involvement, they can submit the electronic form, which will also be updated. Melissa and I are working on that next week, or to submit it by mail via the address below. And if it is a grievance where the HSAC needs to be involved, the person that opens it and understands what the grievance is about will forward that appropriately immediately to where it needs to go. For example, if it needs to be reviewed by the HSAC chair, by the policy and planning chair, whatever I said earlier. Sorry, Sharita. Yes. Sharita, I think your hand is up.
Yeah, so I want to take you back to the limitation slide.
Yes.
What does it mean by coordinated? The policy does not apply to coordinated entry system. Like when you say the coordinated entry system, what are you specifically referring to? Just to make sure I understand that. Is that just the process of calling on the phone and being prioritized?
It
and
is
that's
that. It is
or-
also maybe the length of time it's taking to be put into housing. It could be related to the inability to reach a client and that client being reprioritized, whereas the client is saying, I was always here and I never got a call. Any of that kind of stuff related to coordinated entry.
Okay.
And placement.
Gotcha.
Whereas this one is more related to issues within a provider or issues among providers or issues with the lead agency unrelated to coordinated entry, basically.
Okay.
Or the funding process, right? All right. And then the last slide is just a simple public posting. It is that all Durham COC members will post a physical copy of this new policy in an area visible to their staff, especially those working with people experiencing homelessness who are receiving services. And these policies will be discussed and acknowledged upon participant intake, and copies will be maintained in participant files. So this part hasn't changed. We've been doing that for a long time. Our policy has already been posted and has already been being maintained, hopefully, in client files. That hasn't changed, but we are updating it with the new policy. So that is my presentation, Madam Chair. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. Otherwise, I will leave it to Melissa and you to work out what happens next.
Thank you so much, Anthony, for this presentation. My first question is we need to approve this, right? The policy and planning needs to approve this final write-up that you just presented, or no?
Yeah, so the next step would be to recommend for this to go to the full HSAC for formal approval and posting. And this policy would go into effect on January 1st. So, we would need the time between, the HSAC meeting on Wednesday to January 1st to make sure that we update our website. We'll update the forms and everything so that the policy can fully go into effect in the new year.
So we need, policy and planning needs to approve for it to go to be presented to HSAC to
Right,
become
for final recommendation.
official policy.
Correct.
Okay. I can't even remember what my second question was. Oh, I think it was a statement. So the floor is open if for anybody who has questions about the policy, anything they need clarification on, before we entertain the motion to carry this to the full HSAC.
Sharita, this is Heidi. Thank you so much, first of all, for this great work and reviewing policies across the nation, just trying to help us get ours as best as we can. Has there been any, my question is related to the code of conduct. Has there been any change in that with this policy revision? Are we changing any aspects of the code of conduct?
I would say a resounding yes, because we didn't have an official code of conduct before, although the spirit of the bullets was contained throughout our original policy for the most part. So it does change in that we have established, I know, right, Melissa, the baby is so cute. It does change in the way that we have established it as a formal code of conduct that we will want all members to agree to. But the spirit of it was pretty contained within our original policy before.
Gotcha. And I apologize if you've sent this and I haven't read it, I've neglected to read it, but have we seen the code of conduct? I'd just be curious about it.
Yeah, so the code of conduct that was in that presentation was the part of the presentation was exactly in the policy.
Okay, all right.
So I'm happy to put it back on the screen if you need a moment to review it, or we can share this with you at another
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, just share it with us. I don't need to see it on the screen again. And I'd be happy to make the motion that we do forward this to the full HSAC for review and approval, and that we endorse it.
Thank you.
Not sure we're ready for a motion, but thanks.
Anybody else have any other, thanks for your questions and comments. Commissioner Carter, does anybody else have any questions or comments for Anthony as it relates to the grievance policy? I'm just curious, how many historically, like in the last year, do you know how many grievances we've had?
I do actually. We've had about 15, which is an average of 1 to 2 a month. They vary in terms of why folks are filing. I will say that a couple of them were filed anonymously. So when an anonymous grievance is filed, it's usually for information purposes only. We can't really do a lot of specific follow-up. But there were some valid concerns that we have worked with providers to help resolve. And then sometimes those that file the grievance just walk away from the process and say, I don't want to be bothered with it. So it does vary. I would say out of those 15, maybe a good 10 of them advanced, but some of them, again, under this new policy, wouldn't necessarily resort to a grievance, right? Because they would have worked through a provider's internal policy, or they might be dissatisfied about something that doesn't rise to the level of a grievance, let's say. And Sharita, with the 15, I look at it like this: there's 15 grievances in a year, which is literally like 1 to 2 grievances a month. So it's not like some huge number, but it's worth us having a tight policy to make sure that one, we try to get the number down, but also that we really hit the parts of the system that need to be hit in terms of paying it attention. when problems arise.
Anthony, I want to ask you a question. I can only talk about like my family. So I wanted to know, in the grievance process, is there any way that you can let's see, how can I ask? Is there any way that we could consider like weather? And the reason why I ask this is because one time we had a family who went through the grievance process, and there was a storm arise, and the process for it was for them to leave the shelter. And I was wondering, is there any way that we could consider the weather, consider circumstances that is beyond the grievance process? I guess I'm asking.
What?
Let me jump in for a second, Anthony. So, I mean, it's a great question. And the challenge we've had that challenge relate, whether it's weather or anything else, with people being exited from shelter and filing the grievance. Part of our reason for adjusting this grievance is to be able to respond much quicker than our old grievance policy. Our old grievance policy would take a month or longer.
Yep.
And at that point, it's kind of a moot point, because whatever happened is kind of under the water and people are back in the shelter by the time we get the grievance resolved.
Okay.
A lot of this, we've really been trying to triage. And if people file a grievance while they're still in shelter before they're put out, there's a possibility people might be able to stay in the shelter. But if people wait and file a grievance after they've been exited and when they're on the street, you're still talking a 2 to 3 day process at a minimum, just because we've got to get it. Then we've got to get in touch with the person and hear from them a little bit more on the story. Then figure out, did you talk to or did you file something with that provider? The answer is no. Okay. Then we talk to the provider, hear their side of the story, and try and negotiate or try and find what is the fair and reasonable thing, because there's always two sides to every story. And our goal is to make sure that both sides are heard and we come together very quickly to come up with that resolution. And if the person's already been exited and they're out on the streets, it's not like we can just sort of flip a switch and put them back in, because the bed that they were in may have been given to a new family.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's important to file. I think for your families, it's really important to let them know to file a grievance. It's if they feel that they've been wronged or they're being asked to leave, to file as soon as they get it, not after the fact, if they want to try and stay in there.
Okay.
And definitely encourage them to follow the internal process with the provider, because that's going to move faster, because, you know, they can sort of talk or negotiate. And, you know, if they're talking to you, you could be their advocate and try and help it, because if it comes to us, it adds another layer of people having to talk and takes longer.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Is this something if there are no additional questions, is this something the committee is ready to move on?
Yeah.
I think Commissioner motion still stands. Commissioner Carter's motion still stands, so I would need a second.
I second.
All right, it's been proper motioned by Commissioner Carter, seconded by Ebony Ross. Although those in favor, please put yes in the chat box. If you're listening in, please give your name and give your vote. You have the same right to also say no if you don't agree.
And this is Danielle. I'm driving. I vote yes.
Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, our motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the point and time count plan. Is Shantae on? Lord, are you assisting with this?
I am, oh, Shante was planning to be on or not, but I can,
It's not, I mean, what I'm looking at is not very lengthy. I did get a
No.
copy of it this morning.
right, let me share my screen and I will attempt to share it with the committee. Are you seeing my screen?
I don't see it
I
yet.
did not.
Not yet, Lord.
Okay. Not now.
Yes.
We see the
Oh.
file folder. We don't see an open document.
I've opened it. Now,
Yep.
hey, thanks for your patience with that. This plan, Dante at Housing for New Hope has drafted. I provided some comments to her last week, and she finalized it on Friday and sent it to me late Friday for presentation to the committee. The committee needs to approve a point-in-time count plan, at least by its in its January 8th meeting for the 2024 count that has been scheduled for Wednesday, January 24th. As most everybody on the committee hopefully knows, the point-in-time count has two basic components. One is counting people who are sheltered and homeless, and secondly, counting people who are unsheltered and are homeless. Most of the plan itself concerns counting unsheltered people because sheltered people are counted through our Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS, and that generally is handled through the data center and working with the HMIS participating agencies and projects to ensure that the count is accurate in the HMIS, and projects have opportunities to make sure that client data in the HMIS is current and up to date for the purposes of the count and on the night of the count. So we are working, we've had 2 or 3 planning meetings with Housing for New Hope as the unsheltered coordinating agency to prepare for the plan for the count, the unsheltered count. In addition to that, we are working to ensure that counting homeless youth in the 18 to 24-year-old age group, particularly, is also a focus of this year's count. HUD is making that a focus and a priority for point-in-time counts over the last several years as well. So we want to be mindful of that. So I'm kind of scrolling through the plan. Hopefully people can read it as I'm talking you through it. Again, we are planning to convene at the Durham County Main Library in downtown Durham at 7 p.m. and begin deploying teams by 8 p.m. Housing for New Hope currently has, as it says, 85 active encampments, and they'll be verifying those in the 30 days prior to the count. We're planning to have 15 to 20 teams assigned to inspect specific known locations, working with the city's community safety department to have as many HEART staff members as possible serve as team lead. I think that HEART staff would be supplemented by experienced team leads from previous years. They're also working to get donations of winter essentials kits to distribute to unsheltered people that are encountered on the night of the count. We're also using, again, the Counting Us app that we've used for several years now. It's a mobile application developed by Syntex Solutions, and We are adding some functionality using funds available to Housing for New Hope through the Unsheltered Coordinating Agency contract to pay for the volunteer registration portal, as well as some organizing of the teams themselves through the app. Training will again be offered, both live and recorded training options, and all volunteers will need to participate in training. And then finally, to make the count as accurate as we can, we'll also be looking to count people in the days after the count. HUD's guidance allows for service space counts up to 7 days after the official night of the count, and we'll be working with community partners as listed here to do some service-based counts as well, and looking at a targeted event for youth at the downtown skate park, just across from the community development offices in Durham Central Park, on the afternoon of January 25th to potentially interview young people at that event to inquire where they spent the previous night. That's the plan at this point. Happy to accept any comments, questions, suggestions, and take them back to Housing for New Hope and the Planning Committee.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. I do have some questions, but I'll hold my questions in the event other people have questions, because they may have the same questions I do.
Okay.
So I will entertain questions from the committee at this time. Okay, well, I don't hear any questions, so I'm gonna ask away. Has Shantae mentioned any areas within this current plan where they may need additional support, assistance, help? I'm specifically thinking about the youth plans and the packages they want to give out, the plans for the skate park site and things like that. Do you know?
I do not know. I don't know if there are others on the call in the meeting that may be able to answer that. I'm not aware of any specific requests that Shantae, asked me to ask the committee members to assist with. I believe things are progressing satisfactorily in these various areas, including the youth count. I don't know, Ebony, through the Durham Public Schools, if you have been contacted, you may want to share anything about contact you've had or conversations you've had with Housing for New Hope regarding counting young people as well. But I think we've had the involvement with the Office on Youth in the Durham City Manager's office that also I think is going to be assisting with that targeted event, talking about developing flyers that would be distributed to youth around the community, particularly potentially at the downtown bus station and through the schools, perhaps, to although there's concern that ordinarily between 1 and 5, part of the reason for the 1 to 5 time on January 25th was thinking that a lot of youth under age 18 would ordinarily be in school before then, in the morning. And so the thinking is, if there's going to be youth, might be more possible to access them in the afternoon.
think Lloyd, if I could just jump in, Sharita, it's a good question. There have been discussions around whether and what to provide, similar to like winter essentials kits or jackets or school supplies and things like that have come up. I don't have the specific request like Lloyd in this conversation, but I do know it has been a part of the discussions to talk about what supplies may be useful for them, and to make sure that we, sort of did something nice for them in terms of their participation in this process and all of that.
Yeah, and I would add too, thanks, Anthony. I would add that, if people on the call want to contribute in any way or organize gathering of kits for general distribution to unsheltered people or specifically for youth and school supplies and things, to contact Shantae or Housing for New Hope directly about what they would still be looking to gather for that.
That sounds good. Does anybody else have any questions? I will reach out to Shantae, because the youth at my church are always looking for ways to give back in the community. And so I was just trying to figure out how I could get my youth department working and help them with anything we can help with. So,
Right. It's our, if the committee is pleased with the plan as it's presented today, certainly you can approve it today. If you prefer to wait till January, that's an option as well. But we did want to get it to the committee so that you have time to review it and make any recommendation for improving it that you want to make to Housing for New Hope.
all right, guys. So this is an item that we can move on, or we don't have to move on. If folks feel that what we have here is sufficient, I will entertain a motion for us to carry this forward. And it would, if we approve it today, it would go to full HSAC in the upcoming.
Madam Chair, I believe there's no need
There's no need
for approval by the HSAC. This is, according to the governance charter, is within the purview of policy and planning.
But it would still be presented. If we approve it today, it will be presented at HSAC, just so HSAC will have a point of reference.
Correct. We'll be talking about it at Wednesday's HSAC meeting. And Shantae is preparing to make that presentation.
Okay. If no one else has any questions, and we are satisfied with the plan that's been presented to us, I will entertain a motion at this time.
I move to approve.
Have a motion from not Heidi.
Helen.
The H is this one.
Who finally made it to the meeting.
Motion from Helen this morning. I will entertain a second as well to go forward so we can vote.
Hey, it's Alicia Thompson. I second the motion made by Helen.
Thank you very much. So all members of policy and planning, you can vote by saying yes, no.
We will be working to send the copy of this document out to the policy and planning committee and everyone on the call at this time. We'll do that later today, more than likely.
And the motion carries. Thank you so much, policy and planning.
Thank you,
and thank you, Lloyd, so much. And we are moving now at 11:20 to the last item on our agenda. We're making good time. And this is discussion about our emergency shelter prioritization and 30-day shelter stay. Colin, you want to take it? You want me to start?
I will defer to whatever your preference is, Madam Chair.
Well, so we recently had some discussions about our shelter prioritization, and most specifically, our 30-day shelter status and what that means. And so on last Thursday, we had a meeting with UMD, Families Moving Forward, and Nicole Lamb with Coordinated Entry, some folks from Healthcare for the Homeless, and some other folks that are doing work, especially with our vulnerable populations here in Durham, about the 30-day policy, kind of what it means, what we as providers of services to those persons are seeing as challenging for us in light of the 30-day policy. I think we had a very good start of our conversation. We spent the majority of the time on singles and didn't really get an opportunity to talk about the challenges for families, but we do plan to reconvene. We haven't set a date yet to have that discussion. We also asked staff from UMD to be here today to share in the discussion regarding our priorities, our policy, 30-day policy, and some of the ideas and solutions kind of we've been tossing around that we wanted to bring to HSAC to discuss. Colin, do you have all of that in front of your brain, like what we talked about in front of you?
About all the things that we talked about. Well,
yes.
We talked about a few things and recognized that the shift to a 30-day shelter was in an effort to help motivate people to start working on housing plans sooner, as we as humans naturally tend to do well when there are concrete expectations and deadlines. And that was kind of a way of doing the shift, while our COC benchmark for shelter is not 30 days. It's a little longer than that. We wanted to start with a 30-day to sort of get people moving in the right direction. And it became operationalized in that every person had 30 days at the shelter unless there was a concrete housing plan. And if there was a concrete housing plan, i.e., I'm moving into apartment ABC on X date, then time would be extended. And we talked through what are housing plans, what does a housing plan look like, and could a housing plan look different for each person? Somebody's housing plan might be the first week just getting out of bed and taking a shower every day is part of that housing plan. And looking at the 30-day rather than 30-day per person, looking at 30 days on an aggregate over the course of the shelter as a whole, and trying to move closer to that deadline. The other thing that we recognized is our prioritization process is currently referring the sickest and most vulnerable people to emergency shelter. And that group of people, expecting them to find an exit to permanent housing in 30 days is an almost impossible ask. So we've almost set up our shelters to fail in having short lengths of stay because of the population that's being referred currently. We talked about looking at our prioritization as well. That's something we'll be looking at down the line and making some adjustment. Well, we're talking about making some adjustments and proportionately allocating shelter beds based on priority 1, 2, and 3 populations in the homeless system, so that we're better able to use the beds instead of having 50 beds for everybody who's incredibly vulnerable. And if that's what we do, then people who are less vulnerable remain unsheltered for extended periods of time and will only get into shelter when they're harder and harder to serve and sicker. And that didn't seem like a fair thing to do. So it sort of made sense to take a look and take a step back and say, well, what if 20% of our, and I'm just making up a number, so, let's say 20% of the people experiencing unsheltered homelessness right now are really high barrier, hard to serve. Well, then maybe 20% of our beds in the shelter system should be set aside for that group of people. And then we should look at category 2 and category 3. So we've got a blend of people in the shelters. And this would allow us to, one, help more people. It would also allow us to possibly put a stop on some of the revolving door of the same people coming in and out of the shelter over and over and over and over again. And it would also allow us to allow case managers a little bit of a reprieve and have a little bit of a break in the work, as working with people exiting homelessness is an exhausting, emotionally, mentally, physically, it's a lot. And having everybody being the hardest of the hardest to serve is draining and takes a toll on staff. It's nice to have a few lower barrier households in the shelter too, to be able to say, oh, here's somebody who I can get out of here in a week because they've got a long history of housing and they've got a history of stability. What can we do to get that person housed? And getting somebody out in a week or 2 weeks would make up for somebody who's there for 45 days or 60 days in that overall average. And our goal is really looking at the system performance and trying to help as many people as possible in a fair and equitable manner. So that's what we kind of wanted to talk about today, of, some things that we could do. Urban Ministries had also suggested what we could do, on what they could do is clearly define housing goals, what those measurable expectations were, so that doing regular check-ins and doing regular case management meetings, if people get to 30 days, there's no surprise on day 30 that they're being asked to leave, because there were benchmarks week 1, week 2, week 3 that they were supposed to be doing. And there would also be no surprise when they get to 30 days that they're getting an extension, because all those first benchmarks were met as they were working through the program. One of the things that the 30-day shelter had sort of allowed for, and where we got into some of these tricky situations, was people would come into a 30-day shelter and do nothing until day 29. And then on day 29, it's like, oh wait, I'm getting kicked out tomorrow. I better go hustle and do all this stuff. And that last minute hustle was too little, too late, and then they would be exited. And there were a lot of feelings that, oh, this isn't fair. Da, da, da. So it's like, well, it's a good point. It wasn't fair, but by the same token, you can't wait to the last minute and expect everything to be done that you're supposed to do for 30 days. So that's kind of where we are in a nutshell, and wanted to kind of talk it through with the committee, get some thoughts. And is there anything else, Madam Chair, that you wanted me to share?
Nope, I think you covered it all, unless UMD wanted to add anything. Did we miss anything, Nicole? Sheldon or Shona? Did we miss anything?
I don't think can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't think anything was missed. I do think that, it's important for myself and Shona to just, lift up that, of course, we do offer extensions and things like that. But sort of to Colin's point, we already edited our policy to just be a little bit more clear about that, because there were a lot of things that we might do operationally, but that we didn't necessarily have in black and white. So you might not know factually that this is how we go about doing things, even though it's something that we're, doing in practice. So that's something that Shona and myself already worked on. We definitely recognize that everyone may not be successful within 30 days, and the measurable goals is definitely something that we already have in place, and case managers do their best to try to get, feedback on their progress and so forth. Shona, anything?
Yep, I think that's great. Thank you.
The only thing, as Nicole was talking, and I was just kind of trying to revisit Thursday's conversation, is we were also talking about our length of stay numbers versus our exits to permanent housing numbers. And I think one of the requests I think I had suggested, Colin, was to maybe make sure we're giving the shelters like some kind of quarterly update or something on where their length of stay numbers are. Also, the more rapid transitions we have and folks are not exiting to permanent housing, it just, even though it might shorten the numbers on one side where we're showing that people are coming in and going out in 30 days, is it's increasing our numbers on the other side where people are being exited but not going into permanent housing solutions. So we just need to kind of manage that balance, which is why the suggestions and the recommendations and the thoughts that Colin shared came up. So we want to hear from the committee on your thoughts at this time, and I guess we need to figure out when we're going to reconvene as a group, Colin, Shona, Nicole, to do more work around this. Any thoughts, committee members?
This is Heidi. I can really see how it makes sense to reconsider the prioritization and also the length of stay that's the benchmark, and changing it to 30 days for all the reasons that you all have laid out for us. I think it would probably be important, and I know that this is something that all of our providers and members of HSAC are always thinking about, but just keeping our focus on how or if this shifts our goal. Does it help or hurt us meeting our goals to be sure we're racially equitable in who we serve? We've worked hard on being sure that we are serving those who are experiencing homelessness proportionately to race. And we've been doing a good job there lately, and have even gotten, points for that when we've been evaluated for various things. So I just think it'd be important to keep an eye on that. It might not have any impact, but just to be on alert for that. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it makes sense, Commissioner Carter. The equity piece is important, and we've been very intentional on the referrals to permanent supportive housing, intentional on that to ensure that we maintain equity. I think as we start shifting to a prioritization process on the front door going into emergency shelter, we will take a lot of the things that we've learned on the exit strategy on prioritization and apply it to shelter as well, to ensure that we have equity. As you know, our homeless system is significantly disproportionately made up of people of color in relation to the overall population in Durham. So we definitely want to make sure that we continue to provide services on an equitable manner.
I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. I think just the equity lens with the population that's so disproportionately skewed is a challenge. I think that we serve more people of color because more people of color they are the folks that are having the challenge. I don't know if that's necessarily us doing anything equitable. I just think we take what's there, and we house the people who are there. We can only do what our population is. I don't know what other steps we can take to be equitably intentional. I think our numbers look good because that's the population of people we serve. And so, I mean, I'm always wondering or trying to figure out how do we truly implement or be able to say and see that we're doing something beyond just this is the population or these are the group of people we have to serve in our system, and we connect them to resources accordingly. So I say that to say that I think we should be careful in saying that we're being equitable, because I don't necessarily know if we are. Does anybody get what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I was just putting that in the chat. I do see what you mean, Sharita. I feel like in the past we were not doing as good of a job having those that we serve match up with the ratios in our actual system, and that we put some changes in place to become more intentional and are doing somewhat of a better job now of that. Maybe I'm remembering that incorrectly, but I hear what you're saying. If those in our system are disproportionately of one race and that's who we're serving, it's not necessarily because pat ourselves on the back, we're doing a good job, but anyway, I know that we always are thinking about that, and I just want to appreciate that and continue to lift it up.
If I could interject here, it is a measurable number based on our reporting, and we are at equity. We have about 74% of the populace coming in. Our homeless population is about 74% African American, people of color. And we are bringing that same percentage into shelter. We're also exiting that percentage. We are almost exactly at equity. I think what we're looking at is making sure that we're not putting policies or that we're not putting even assessments in place that would kind of skew that number. And right now we are doing a very, very good job at being that we are at equity now. And I think what we want to make sure is that we don't dilute our equity by any policies. And I don't think that this would do that. I think we're in a very good place, and that even moving this policy is not going to change that.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any additional things to add around the 30-day shelter stay in our emergency shelter prioritization at this time? I have a hand up. I guess it's down now. Any additional questions or comments?
That was me putting my hand down a moment ago.
Well, I see we don't have any additional questions or comments. We're at the end.
Sharita,
Uh-huh.
sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
I couldn't get my hand up in time because I'm holding a baby on my other hip. But I put a link in the chat to an article about an initiative in Greensboro related to emergency shelter and I guess an additional effort they're doing there to extend the type of places people might stay other than just your more typical shelter. They're doing things with pallets, I guess they call them, and are serving 50 or so individuals that way. And just wondered what our staff thinks about that approach. Is there a window of opportunity for something like that here? Would it make sense? I think other elected officials have expressed some interest in this too. Actually, this article was forwarded to me by Natalie Beyer, who's a school board member and serves on HSAC. And anyway, we thought it was really intriguing. It would definitely just be, sort of for emergencies. These pallets would not be for permanent living, of course, but could be one additional strategy, and wanted to know what everyone thinks. Not now necessarily, but I wanted to just get it out there.
I can share a little bit on that, Commissioner Carter, because these have been around for a few years, and they were one of the things that we had talked about during COVID about a possible solution. And during COVID, with emergency management, county, and us looking through the logistics, there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle. And using it as an emergency shelter, finding a location and making sure that there's showers and all the infrastructure. It's, while the shelter, the boxes themselves, or not the boxes, that, I mean, they're pallets, but they're basically like containers that have windows and air conditioning. You need to pull power, you need to have plumbing available for the shower facility. It's, you know, if you stood it up for a winter, it's a pretty expensive short-term piece, but there's also the staffing component and feeding. So there's a lot of pieces. They're kind of like, they're not shipping containers. They kind of look like shipping containers. They're really modular aluminum sided things that can stand up and be put together pretty quickly. And probably less than 2 hours, you would have a functioning, you know, place for a bed to go in, and window air conditioner type unit. There are neat ways of doing it. It's a matter of how much money would we want to put into creating kind of like I equate this to the emergency shelter equivalent of a tiny home village.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that. So
Yeah.
you need the space, and you would need the staffing and all those other pieces. So putting together a rough budget to see what that would look like, and whether or not city and county would have the appetite for being able to fund that. For, you know, once you stand it up, it's something that would have to probably maintain for a year or more. And, you know, as we know in the homeless system, once we stand things up, it's very difficult to take it down or take it away or take it out of the system unless you're replacing it with something bigger and better.
Unless, I mean, if it would get the unsheltered count down, you know, significantly, I could see it being something that city and county leaders might have an appetite for.
It definitely could. The pallets that I've looked at have been geared more towards singles. I guess you could, they're not really big enough for families. We'd have to look into whether or not they make units that are big enough for a family of 3 or 4 to stay in. So happy to run some numbers and put together some proposed budgets.
That'd be awesome.
Committee,
I mean, if others are interested, I think that would be awesome.
Put together like a hypothetical plan that we could look at next month, and sort of say, all right, is this something that we want to do, and here's what the cost could be. And keep in mind, while the construction cost of these containers is relatively small, you still have the cost of all the supportive services that need to be in place.
Sure, to do it well, right.
Yeah, so you're basically running an emergency shelter.
Right.
And finding a vendor who's willing and able to do that. I think we could probably pull it all together, but we can definitely start with, here's what a rough sketch of this would look like.
Thank you, Colin. That'd be exciting.
Yeah, no, we can do it. We, at the time during COVID, we chose not to do it because of the expense, and at the time there just wasn't enough staff to meet the basic needs that we had going on.
Right.
And by the time we pulled it together, doing the pallets really on our rough budgets wasn't really going to save that much money versus using motel rooms.
I see. I gotcha.
So, because you got maintenance and both. It's there's pros and cons to all of it.
Of course, right. as with every investment and every policy decision.
And the big piece is you got to find a place to set these up that people are willing to go to. And if you're setting up on city and county land, you got to make sure it's not city and county like parkland or something else that other people are using other things. So it's the place that we had thought about doing it was over near the old Boys and Girls Club.
Oh yeah.
Like there's a lot, like a playground lot that's kind of nearby.
Right.
That we thought could potentially work over there. And then
well, heck, I think the county owns that building now and that land.
Yeah, so I mean, there's ways to look at it. I'll put
Okay.
together, my team and I can put together some things to bring back next month if you'd like.
That'd be great if anyone else is interested. I don't want to be issuing edicts here, but if others are interested.
I definitely would be interested just to see. And I'm also interested in like if the different prioritization, like you said, Colin, maybe having like priority 1 bed set aside for the medically vulnerable, and then so many, beds for priority 2 and 3. So then maybe the ones that are priority 1, which are medically vulnerable, can instead of 30 days, have like 45 days or a little bit longer than the ones that are priority 2 and 3.
Mhm.
I'm always in favor of looking at new ideas, and sometimes some out of the box thinking it can be helpful as well. So I'm interested in more information.
Colin, would it be appropriate to say that this idea also supports some of the ideas that were shared by the lead work group recently with regard to finding, kind of emergency solutions and making our system more robust?
Absolutely.
So I think this is a great, it's great it will be great for the lead work group to see also how their discussions filter up and real solutions are being entertained as a result of some of the ideas that they share. So I appreciate that. Colin, Sharita had to log off, so she asked if you would close the meeting for her.
Yep, I saw that. So any other items, any other discussion on the 30-day shelter changes, prioritization, pallet shelters? See Helen shaking her head no. Any other items that anybody would like to bring to the attention of the group? Going once, going twice. I'll take a motion to close the meeting.
I'll move to close.
Motion by
I
Helen
second the motion.
and a second by Ms. Holmes. All right, all in favor can say yes in the chat or log off. Thanks all. Have a great one. Take care. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.